Are we on? Hey, church. Look what happened. We changed seats. We are just trying to keep you on your toes. We're just trying to move things around a little bit. And so we changed seats tonight. So
I got demoted.
The topic was,
every time.
I do that every time.
Every time.
I do this every time. So how do I do this? All right, hold on a minute, church. Hi, I just have to turn my phone off here. Thank you very much. There we go. Because I'd like to see your comments. This is doing it too. Everything's talking to me. Everything's talking. Hold on, stop. Hi, we're back with you now.
Next week, I'll be back in that seat.
Yes.
Because
okay. Now we're ready and all. But no, I'm in the center seat because I kind of sparked the discussion for our topic tonight, and so I offered to to lead it and all, and so that's that. So. Anyway, so we're glad to have you with us. We just realized that this is the 9th tabletop session we've done. That's kind of crazy. I can't believe it's been 9 times. So we're glad you're with us tonight. We're glad that you're hanging out. And we hope that tonight's tabletop discussion is an encouragement to you and is challenging to you in some form or another.
Before we start,
Steve, yes.
Do you need to say hi to anybody?
No. I always say bye to somebody.
Oh, okay.
Very good, yes.
Okay.
I'll talk to you in a minute, India, down in Garland, okay? So, let me say, so tonight, if you have, depending on what news feeds you're on or what kind of Facebook feeds you're on or social media feeds you're on, you might have noticed that over the last Thursday or so that Ravi Zacharias' family announced that the cancer in his back has become inoperable and they cannot treat it any longer. And so they basically said they have no further help they can offer him, and meaning that his cancer will be terminal. And so a lot of people have been coming out and talking about the influence and the impact that Robbie has had on their lives and all. And so we were talking a little bit about that, and we were talking about influence. And so when you think about people of influence, in our lifetime, Billy Graham is kind of the definition of influence and legacy. He's been able to remain above being tarnished and above scandal and everything like that. But there's other people. Robbie has Norm Geisler just recently passed away. He was also tremendously influenced in theological circles.
R.C. Sproul.
R.C. Sproul was one. Do you have one you want to throw into the discussion?
Those were the only ones.
Those are the ones. Okay.
No one else died.
No one else.
And then obviously there's other people of great influence like Mother Teresa, people like that. And so tonight we wanted to talk about influence. We wanted to talk about, do you, basically it's do you have to write a book to be influential? Do you have to be famous to be influential? Or is influence something that anyone and everyone can have and can exercise in the lives of others? So that's what we want to talk about tonight. That's our topic. So that's what we want to talk about. So first thing we want to address is how do you define influence? So do you guys have some definitions of influence you want to put on the table for us?
I cheated and just looked it up.
Well, there you go.
And what I got was basically being able to affect other people's attitudes or emotions or actions. And so, it's basically if any person does something or believes something or changes an attitude or is compelled to do something, either because you do it or because you told them to, or because you have had some kind of an impact on their thinking, then you're exercising influence over that person.
Yeah. And
so it's very broad. It's, it's a little vague. I think influence comes in probably all different shapes and sizes, and we'll talk about that, I think, tonight a little bit. So, but yeah, that's what I got from just a quick Google search.
Yeah. But I think that's right. It's sometimes it's like setting someone on a path, especially in our circles for church and in spiritual ministry and everything, setting one on a path, having setting them in a place where there's a long-term influence in their life and all. And so, yeah. Now, you want to throw anything into that mix there? Defining influence or?
I'd probably say that the only thing I would think when I think of influence is a very intimate relationship, especially when we talk about Christian influence specifically. I think of very intentional discipleship making that, I mean, we talk about here all the time at Crossing.
Mhm.
So when I think about that, I think about intentional relationships, intentional discipleship, intentional mentorship with other people that we are pouring into. You know, so much of what my staff does in youth ministry, and so much of what many of our people here do at Crossing. But and it's not. I guess it's not. I should take a step back. It's not just Christian influence too. There are plenty of people in the world who have had influences on other people, whether it be anything from music to philosophy that people have been influenced by and emulate. So
Yeah.
it's just very
Music.
intimate.
Music's
Yeah.
a huge influence.
Celebrities. I can remember when Madonna hit the scene when you guys were still in the crib. I can remember when Madonna hit the scene, and it's like every little teenage girl was dressed like Madonna. She was everywhere, you know,
Mhm.
and that's influence. you
Taylor
know.
Swift.
Taylor Swift.
Today,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
The equivalent.
Taylor Swift. Yeah. So there's a lot of different examples of influence out there and all. But you'd said something because like a moment ago we started talking about people of influence like Ravi and Billy Graham and so forth like that, and then you brought it down and you said right here in the local church, you know, and so then we would have to say that influence is not limited to people with a large platform. That it's also that any one of us can be influential is what you just brought us. You brought us to that conclusion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then some of the things we can think about is that, there is no age requirement because students can be influential with parents and with other students, you know, and there's no size requirement, you know, so you don't have to have so many followers on Instagram to be able to be influential.
Children can be influential. They
Absolutely.
can influence their parents to do all sorts of irrational things.
Yeah. But that doesn't hold up in a court of law. You know, and then also we don't have to be perfect to be influential. I think we do have to be authentic and real, but we don't have to be perfect to be influential. You know, so influence we're defining it then as able to influence opinion and actions and behavior. And we know that people do it all the time. We know that people buy products that they don't need because they've been influenced that they need
Marketing and advertising is an influence.
Right. And Disney is a huge influencer.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. And so there's lots
Everybody sings "Let It Go," even adults.
Yes, that's right.
My own wife, in our house, she just watched Frozen 2, and so now it's "Into the Unknown." That's the big song in the house right now.
Okay.
I'm tone deaf, but I'm trying really hard not to just belt it right now.
Into the unknown.
So
would
so let's talk then about
wreck the whole thing.
let's talk about role models then. Role
Wait,
models
befo-
influence.
Before we do that,
Yes.
I want to make a point, something I did not get off Google. This is an original thought to me. Influence, though, is so far we've all really talked about it in terms of being good influence.
Oh.
You know, but influence is not.
No, I brought up Madonna.
That's true. That's true. Sorry. Not all good influence. But influence itself is morally neutral. It's not good. It's not bad. It just, it just is. And so whether it's good or bad is 100% dependent on the person who is doing the influencing and whether they're using it to accomplish good goals, or whether they are using it to manipulate or something like that. So, influence it's very powerful, but it can be used definitely for tremendous good or tremendous bad.
Yeah. And when you say that, I mean, not that I really want to go there, but I mean, I think it's worth saying is that our media right now is attempting to be, and I'm not talking about TV shows, I'm talking about the quasi fake news shows, which I would put them all in that category. Sorry if that like Turks anyone there, but like they are all trying to be huge influencers toward a particular conclusion that they hold dear, as opposed to being neutral news services. And so
Yeah.
the media really is all about being influential and all. So Yeah.
I think on top of that, if we're talking about, I think generally more so than not, and this is unfortunate, that social media is a bad influencer.
no, I don't agree with that. I think
I-
think what he said is true. It's morally neutral.
I think the loudest people on it, tend to be, I don't know. Like social media tends to be more problematic than not, which is my point.
Because I think it reflects the human heart.
Yeah, but you give a large platform of social media, like Facebook and Instagram, and I mean, I also have a vendetta against Facebook. It's secretly, but
Not anymore. It's not.
well,
So-
to our few people who watch, I mean, it's, what Mark Zuckerberg's gonna come to my house? He may. I don't know. He's probably watching this.
No, he
It
won't.
might.
So let's talk about role models. I'd like to hear you, like if you got an influence, someone who influenced you, put it in the comments tonight and about someone who influenced you. I want to talk about role models and that have influenced us and how they influenced us. So
That bird behind me that keeps hitting the window is influencing me to be super distracted
I
right
know
now.
it's crazy.
It's usually
this
up.
bird.
It's usually up at the kitchen.
Really wants into the room right now. Crazy bird.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So talk about role models that have influenced you, and how they did that.
Any type.
Well, we're talking about in general for positive, So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think so. I kind of compartmentalize when I think of myself. I think of like skills that I have and
Yeah.
people that I really admire. So like musically, I love John Mayer. I think he's the greatest guitar player of all time. And so
Debatable.
I don't think so. I think that's objective fact. But I'm kidding, of course. People would disagree, but he influences me a ton in how he plays, and I just love like his music, and of course, anybody who knows me similarly, my skills, I'm really influenced by Shane and Shane and the way they play and everything. Like I just love how their music sounds, and so I'm really influenced that way musically. Theologically, like when I think biblically, I'm really influenced by like John Piper, and these are big names, of course, and I'll kind of like go broad and then go like hone it in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like John Piper is one of those guys when I know he writes about the same thing all the time, and he jokes too. You read one John Piper book, you've read them all. But I just love it. I love how he packages things, and I like his communication style. I think he's definitely like a type of Jonathan Edwards of today, if that makes any sense. Similarly,
Well,
like,
that's his role model. So.
yeah, well, it makes sense. Like Tim Keller, also somebody that I love how he breaks things down. It's going to be very dispensational of me, but I love Chuck Swindoll. I just love his preaching
Yeah.
style,
Mm-hmm.
and he just like is very charismatic, and he's so smart. So
He's just an outstanding communicator.
I love his preaching. When I think of personally, there are a few men in my own personal life that have influenced me. One being my father.
Mhm. I knew you'd say that.
Yeah. So he was huge in my life. I mean, he brought me to Christ. He's the one who showed me everything when I first became a Christian. Other people, I don't know where he is today, and it's kind of awkward. So, it'll be fun that I say it. Someone who influenced me to love youth ministry is Grace's ex-boyfriend.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, it's a long story. I introduced them. They dated for a while. They broke up. I married her.
Wow.
Happens. He
Yeah.
was a youth pastor, but he influenced me so much in my love for youth, and how I do ministry today. And so he was just a huge influence in my own life, where he just poured into me when I first got to Cairn, and just had me fall in love with youth ministry. and I lived with him for a summer, and he was just a stellar guy at the time. And so I think people like that, there are fringe people that I could say that I've learned a lot from, but I mean, time builds that up.
Yeah, exactly.
I spoke too much already, but
Yeah. No, those are all good examples. Yeah. 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 What about you?
I can't top that. None of Heather's ex-boyfriends have really influenced me to do anything, so I don't know. I have friends in the ministry, guys that I've worked with at other churches that have been big influences on me in one way or another. One in particular, my friend Jonathan, he's come up here and done some stuff with us a few times. He's been an example to me of faithfulness and worship during some really difficult times that I've walked with him through. And so he's been a big encourager, just watching the way that he's, and he's younger than me. He's several years younger than me too. So just to get that off of the table, that you have to be looking to older people or people who are, more mature, wiser, whatever.
Right. That's true.
More seasoned. I mean, you can learn a lot from younger people than yourself. And so I learned a lot from him. I'm going to say I'll do, it's not going to top Grace's ex-boyfriend, but, and I say this not sucking up because I've told you this before, but you have been out of all the guys, I've told you this before, out of all the people that I've served with, I think that you have influenced me more than any other pastor into like really loving and caring for your people,
Thanks.
I
So,
second
so I
that.
think you,
That's a good one.
I think that I've watched you do that better than anyone else that I've ever been around for 6 years now. And so I think that's influenced me and in my own ministry. A couple of other people that I'm close to, like I would say my grandfather was an influencer on me, just personality wise. He doesn't talk very much. And so he's kind of like, when he says something, everyone listens. And I like to think that I learned that from him. I don't use up a lot of words in the course of a day, but I think that's slow to speak, quick to listen, slow to speak. I think I share that personality trait with him, and so that was an influence. And then Heather's grandfather too. He was an influence when I married into the family. To see, talking about influence and talk about legacy, to see the legacy of faith throughout his family, both of his daughters and then all of their kids. I mean, everyone in the family. It's a big family. You've heard me joke about that before. It's a big family, but they all love the Lord. And so, and he was quiet, he was an example, I think, of like quiet, gentle steadfastness. And so he was an influencer. And so those would be like my local ones. I have, famous people that I think I've been influenced by. I'd say the same thing, oddly, with John Piper. Maybe as an example of a person who's a pastor, but also a theologian, author, somebody who kind of has two big platforms like that he's balancing. And so trying to love and shepherd a church, but also he's got a much larger influence through his writing and speaking ministry and stuff. So I learned a lot from that guy. And then the Puritans as just a people group. I think that they have influenced me some, just in the way that they are like high thinkers, very theological, high sort of, very big thoughts about God, but they're hard workers and applied those big thoughts to daily life.
Yeah.
And so I love to read the Puritans. Those would be
some
of my influences.
Those are all really good. That's good. So, so my list, as far as influences in my life, and I've mentioned some of them before, but like, my best friend's mom, Nedra Hodnett, back at home and down there in Texas, and and sitting down with her and showing up at her house with a blank notebook, and she just said, write this in there. First thing you write down in there: God is more interested in your character than he is in your circumstances. So.
Mm-hmm.
The things that she taught me, I still remember, and so her influence on me was really great. And what she did was she introduced me to other people that really influenced my life. And so she introduced me, she said, this is a book I want you want to read. All right. And so she introduced me to Shadow of the Almighty and it's the story of Jim Elliot as told by Elizabeth. And it's really about Jim's discipleship leading up. Most of the book is about his college years and about his discipleship and how the Lord was leading him to Ecuador. And his really intense fervor and his intensity of he didn't understand why his classmates would go and play basketball at lunch instead of going in and reading their Bible and praying. He just had no concept for why they thought that all those frivolous things were okay, because the kingdom of God was so at hand, and was burning, and so that and then his journaling, the way he journaled, and she does a lot of his journals in here. That has been hugely influential in my life. And then at the same time, the pastor of the church we're at, Merle Fulmer, Merle gave me a book one year when I went in to talk to him, Andrew Murray's Abide in Christ. This is the book you gave me, Merle. This is it right here. I still have it. Unfortunately, Merle, I'll just have to tell you, just true confessions, it took me about 25 years to actually read the whole thing. That's just how bad I am at follow through and everything. I'm sorry. But I did finish it, and we
read through it together a couple years ago, didn't we?
Yeah,
that's the one.
Yeah. And so it was really good for me, But I think that the influence of it was that he invested in my life the way that Nedra did and the way so many other people did, and so they invested in my life, and that's why, because of the influence of books like this, that's why I am such a huge fan of our children's reading program in Sun Country, and in particular, I really want to make mention of the women in the reading thing, like Amy Carmichael, Mary Slessor, Gladys Allwood, so many others, women role models for our children, and especially our young women, of women who were great role models. I mean, spiritual giants, And so that's why I'm such a huge fan of these books and the reading program our church sponsors and all. And so you can go on from there, like other guys at my age, like Greg Hodnett and Terry Pace and Willie Ivy, Mike Otto here at Crossing, who is pastor before me here, and Gary Nonamaker as well. And then one who's still here right now and that we're praying for right now is Carl Payne. There's been very little in my life that I've accomplished that Carl hadn't been beside me, guiding me, and not always like going, Tim, you ought to do this. It was always just by his own personal example. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because Carl and I are polar opposites. I mean,
yes. Sorry. It's really true.
But it's such a positive influence on me.
In a good way.
It's a good way.
Carl is one of these kind of guys that when you walk in the room, you immediately want to alter your behavior because Carl's there.
He evens us all out.
Amen.
I feel like
I know. I agree.
That's true.
I really agree.
He's our anchor.
He really is.
Yeah, and so Carl has been a huge influence on me, in that regard. So, anyway, and I think that when we do that, it's because people invest in our lives, right? They say, "Here, this would be good for you. Mm-hmm. Read this. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about it." And so I see some of the comments. A lot of people are talking about that.
Yeah.
Where different people have been influential in their life, and it's really true that it comes back to while these people with huge platforms, are influential, whether it's John Piper and all that, they're influential from a distance, but then it's these people that are in our lives on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis, whatever it is. And like many of these that we're seeing in our comments right now, they are really true. Yeah, and I see Rob Ray, he was a younger guy and he was very influential. And I still think about things that Rob Ray said to me a long time ago before I was married. He said a few things to me that still haunt me to this day. There was some truth that he spoke in my life, so. Yeah.
Can I kind of held off on a few, but Steve said it. I would definitely agree with Tim. He definitely influenced me as far as how to love people and the church, even when it's really difficult. I remember one of the books you had me read. What, 2 books? You had me read Crucial Conversations. I still use all that today. And you had me read Grace for the Burned Out Pastor.
Yeah.
I have like notes from those. So my whole first year here was really hard, and but it was really good. Learned a lot. I wasn't gonna share this one, but I think it will in the sense of vulnerability. When I was in college, there was a year I was specifically I was really depressed. I had contemplated suicide, and it was real bad. I was in a really bad relationship. It was really bad. It was horrible. And so there were times during my time in college where I was working overnights to help pay for my college. So I was working security, and I didn't sleep. I remember one week I didn't sleep for almost 72 hours, and I started to like hallucinate. And I remember that particular day I went home to my dad's and I slept for 24 hours straight. And I remember that weekend I was like, something has to change. I was angry for a number of different reasons. I was, wrestling with God for a number of things. And there was a man, 2 men in particular at Cairn who walked with me, Don Cheney. Mm-hmm. He is an elder at formerly Bible Fellowship, now Riverstone, who helped me a lot. And I learn a lot, even now, from that man. I have classes with him. And then there was a professor at Cairn named Dr. Victor Jacobs. And he would sit with me. I remember it was his last year at Cairn, and he was, there was some, stuff happening at Cairn where they had to let go of professors. Not all of us know what really happened, but he was one of them, and for that whole year that I was walking through that mess, he met with me every week to just walk with me through my big questions about why would God allow these things in my life? Why am I here right now? I followed him to Cairn to do ministry, and I was just really angry. But he walked me through a really difficult time in my life, and we went through a book for an entire year, The Complete Green Letters by Miles J. Stanford.
Yes.
And
great book.
And I remember those times. So those are 3 guys. So you, and then Don and Victor, who were really influential.
Yeah, and Don's a really good guy and all. I remember one of the ways that someone influenced me one time was when I was still living here on the campus over in the bachelor pad, and Jay Desco and I shared the bachelor pad. One time he gave me a copy of Ryrie's Basic Theology, and he said, "You're going to need this." And I wasn't pursuing full-time ministry at all or anything, but he just said, "You're going to need this because of what you're going to be doing someday." And then he went on and just said, "You've already got a bachelor's degree. You need to go and do graduate work." And so it was kind of like he influenced me in a lot of ways, but little nudges along the way, and I found that biographies have been hugely influential in my life.
Yeah. Love reading biography.
Yeah, and the way that we ended up in missions, I mean, the way that really pushed us was, reading like E. Stanley Jones' biography and and the way that God moved him into going into India for missions. And so biographies are and that's what parents, that's why these books are so great, So they're just really, really good stuff, So let's talk about what curtails, what diminishes our influence. Anyone? So any comments out there about what diminishes influence?
You want to go first?
No.
All right. I won't go as long as I did last week, but I really think now in our time, and if you want, you could probably watch the first half. Those of you guys who missed last week, shorten it. I really think what diminishes our influence and any kind of testimony that we have right now is when we start bashing other believers, and brothers and sisters in Christ who share in the same Bread of Life that we do, who have the same God that we do, but have different maybe political opinions or opinions about vaccination or whatever. Any of those things, it's just a disservice to any kind of influence you would have had over your believing friends or unbelieving friends when we are really divisive and uncharitable with our words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
that's true.
and that applies to any, how we interact with people on Facebook
Mm-hmm.
or any
Yep.
social media.
Yeah, when you have influence, you can use it for good or bad. We've already said that, but then you can destroy it altogether through things like sin. And I'm just looking at the comments rolling in, saying everything I was going to say. Sin, lack of character, things like that will just totally destroy your influence. They will rob you of that place that somebody's given you to speak into their thoughts and beliefs and actions.
Yeah. And I think that Craig Rochelle always ends every single podcast by saying that people will follow a leader who people will follow. Now I'm going to mess it up, but it goes to the gist of people will follow a leader who is authentic more than a leader who's always right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really true to kind of what you're saying there a little bit. And I think also it's like when we don't invest in other people, I mean, that really is the very essence of influence, is investing in someone else's life in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we don't deem others as being valuable, and we don't deem others as being important, and we don't deem like growing others, around us as being something that we should be involved in, well, that's just kills. There's no influence there at all,
Yeah.
So one of the things that I heard in a podcast also was that that you don't follow through on who you say you are or on what you say you're going to do,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just a huge issue for me, is to be able to follow through on my commitments well, and stuff. And so I think that's always worked against me in that regard. So, but and I think that just as you've already said, it just seems like that when we are not genuine with our desire to love others and to follow through on our character issues, the moral issues of it, really does erode our influence, and stuff. And so, any other comments? One
of the questions here that we had, that you put, how can we be encouraged to be influential in other people's lives? And thinking about that question, I thought we all already are influential in someone else's life.
That's really true. It's really true.
In someone's life. We don't all have a huge platform. We don't all have, people all over the country maybe listening to us or whatever, but every person has somebody else in your life that looks to you for advice or looks to you, for wisdom. And so somebody somewhere looks up to you. And so we all have influence in someone else's life, whether it's a spouse or children or friends or family members or whoever. So, to understand the power of our influence and take it seriously and be intentional with it is the most important thing, I think.
That's such a great comment. That's
so-
really good. Is realizing that we have it. I mean, to try and drive that home. It's like, let's say that you had the cure for the coronavirus and you chose not to share it. I mean, we all have influence, and we all have to understand that we have opportunities to share it.
Mm-hmm.
And to withhold it is the epitome of selfishness and just being wrong,
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really great insight, really good observation,
Yeah, but then that goes back also to the character things that we've already talked about that kind of go into keeping or maintaining a good influence on people. So to understand that you have influence means that you really, it adds another level to how you have to be on guard with your own character,
Mm-hmm.
your own sin, your own
Mm-hmm.
authenticity, your own hypocrisy, things like that. Like, it's important to be a person of your word and to be godly, to be seeking the Lord, because somewhere somebody is looking up to you,
Yeah.
and you have influence over someone. And so, we just don't. None of us get to just do whatever we want, because it won't affect anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
It always affects someone else.
Well,
somewhere.
that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that in preparation for tonight. But, in the past year, maybe year and a half, there's been a number of celebrity Christians who have walked away from the faith, and whether it's I quit, he quit kissing, dating, or whatever. He quit the Lord too. I don't know.
Josh Harris.
Yeah, that guy. And so
Oh my gosh.
And so there's been several celebrity guys that people have looked up to, and they've been influential, and they walk away.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to mess up. I'm going to mess this verse up, but it's like, if I'm not mistaken, does not the Lord say that for you to cause one of my little ones to stumble would be better that you had a mill race tied around your neck and thrown
dropped
into
in the ocean.
and dropped in
Yeah.
the ocean
Yep.
than you caused one of mine to stumble?
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, what a huge responsibility.
Yes, I was going to go there later.
Oh, you
but
were? I'm sorry.
No. That's just to say that the Lord takes the influence that we have very
Really?
seriously.
Yes, amen.
And
Preach it.
so,
Preach it. For one who doesn't like to preach, keep preaching. Go ahead.
You're gonna be in the pulpit
You just
after the
messed me up.
corona.
I'm sorry.
know, I
I'm
know.
sorry because it.
I know.
I want you to keep saying what you're saying because it's right.
no,
It's
that's
good.
just. But yeah, I mean, I thought of two passages in particular. There, it'd be better for a person who than to cause one of these little ones to stumble, to have a millstone tied around their neck and dropped in the lake. That's Jesus's words
Yeah.
about the power that we have to influence people for the kingdom.
Oh man.
And
that
then
is
the book of James,
stellar.
James chapter 3, we talked about it last week, but it's relevant again this week in James chapter 3, James 3:1. James says, "Brothers, not many of you should become teachers, because you know that we'll be judged with a greater strictness."
Mhm.
So, James is talking about it in the form of oral teaching and more of a teacher sense, but I think as he goes on through chapter 3, you see that he's really just talking about the power of our words and the influence that our words have and the power that we have over people to influence their thoughts and actions. And so the point there is that there's a greater responsibility that comes with having influence over people, and we'll be held responsible for that. Spiritually, we'll be held responsible for the influence that we have over people, and we exercise that. So
That's really good, Steve.
in the words of the great philosopher Uncle Ben Parker, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes. Spider-Man.
He was
reference.
summarizing James chapter 3.
Yeah. And for those of you that Ben Parker's talking about, that's Spider-Man's uncle. So, and he dies. I'm sorry, that was a spoiler alert. I shouldn't have said that.
Well, Spider-Man's been out. If you don't know that,
He had
it's too late.
such great influence on Peter Parker, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
But but I want to comment on one thing, because we in a little bit we have dissed some Christian leaders who have walked away from the Lord, and rightfully so. The influence that they carry and the consequences of their lack of handling the influence well will be sharp for them. But at the same time, one of my favorite authors, and I wish I'd mentioned him, is Gordon MacDonald. And he was more of a guy of my age than your age. He was a pastor up in I want to say Connecticut, and he had written books and all. He had a moral failure, and then he went through the process appropriately and abided by it, and came out of it with more influence, in my opinion, with more influence, because he had let God use the other people in his life, and he was humbled. And he really came out of it with more influence because of what he had gone through and the way he approached it and all,
Yeah.
And so there are not a lot of examples of that, unfortunately,
I think
Plenty of examples
I think
of
a
guys
modern
falling
one
into...
would be like Mark Driscoll. Like, even though it wasn't necessarily a moral failure. I think he went through the process, and he's got a pretty successful ministry now. It may be a smaller platform, but I think that's by design. I think he wants to just be where God has him now.
Yeah.
And he's a great teacher.
Yeah.
That's one thing. He's a phenomenal teacher.
You would be too if you had a photographic memory. So
That's true. That guy memorized the whole Bible.
Yeah. But it's interesting though when you say that, because it's like having a skill, like being a great communicator, and the responsibility to use it well is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because there's another
Mhm.
pastor. Actually, there's been a couple pastors in the greater Chicago area in that recent memory, but there's been one in particular that, he's declared himself reformed and ready to go back in the ministry. And so he's going to open up his own church thing again this year. And it's not even been a year. But because he's an effective communicator, people will follow him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is a terrible, terrible thing, that's going to happen. But it is the nature of people who, in my opinion, I don't know if it's overly stated. This is not the overstatement for the night. Close to it, though. But people really
Got plenty of time.
they want to they follow people without really investigating the character or paying attention to the character and whether the influence they have is really good or bad in a sense, So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm not answering your question, Ellen Jones, in the comments. All right. So let's talk about
I think
By
Ronald-
not answering it,
Ronald
are you
McDonald.
answering
I'm
it
not
though?
saying a word. I'm not saying a word.
I think she meant Ronald McDonald.
No.
If
And
you
so-
eat his hamburgers, you will get fat. I think that's how the
I like
influence of that.
I like the influence of that. I'm not a problem with that. Let's talk about biblical examples that we have and the impact or the model or the meaning of those biblical examples in our lives. So, can we move ahead to that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So let's talk about biblical examples. Who do you guys put down as biblical examples of influencers?
I said, if I first went to Paul and I was like, it's too easy. So then I went to Timothy and I was like, it's still too easy. But Timothy was influenced greatly by his grandmother and his mother.
Why?
If you read, is
Make
that
me
what you were
mad.
going to do? Were you
I-
going to do that?
Yeah.
I didn't think of that, and it's great. That's wonderful. I mean, I do have a comment about that later, but not specifically at that one. That is really, really a great observation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So going back to the sermon this Sunday and your email before that even of people who are scarcely mentioned in the Bible but had, a huge impact on a person.
Yeah.
And so Christianity, the way that we know it today, the way that we have it written down, is what it is because of these people. The centurion, with the way he treated Paul last week. But Timothy's grandmother Lois and his mother Eunice, Paul attributes Timothy's faith to them. And there's one mention of them in 2 Timothy. I think there's a mention of his mother one other place in the New Testament. I don't know where it is, but I think there's 2 mentions of her. And that's it. And that's all we know about them. And but apparently he had faithful, believing grandmother and mother who taught Timothy the faith, and then Timothy ends up as an apprentice to Paul and a good friend to Paul and a leader in the church. And so that was one that I thought of.
I think that's outstanding. I
As
love that you bring that
A
up.
good example. And I thought of it as a good example in this way. I separated the influence out in a couple different ways. I thought they had influence by nature of the relationship that they had with Timothy. They were his mother and grandmother. So they had sort of a natural influence in his life. The Pharisees and the way that they were able to influence the crowds in Matthew 27, some of the same people who'd celebrated Jesus on Sunday were now wanting him to be crucified by Friday. In Matthew 27:20, it says the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. So, again, these guys they had influence by nature of the position that they held as Pharisees and religious leaders. And they were able to persuade the people into wanting Jesus dead. And so there's a good and a bad example
Yeah.
of sort of a natural influence that comes either through relationship or just through the position that you hold. And, two very different examples of how to use your influence.
Yeah, those are great
there.
examples.
So those were two. And then I had another one that of kind of an earned influence where Paul and Silas, when they're in Thessalonica in Acts chapter 17, they earned influence by reasoning with the people. And many of the people became believers, and they stayed there for a while, and they moved on. They were forced out of the city. But then when Paul writes back to them later in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, he talks about the great report that Timothy has brought them of the people's faithfulness and their graciousness. And so I think that Paul's influence there had carried on, and obviously it was a faithful community had sprung up there. And so that was more of an example of where Paul had earned this influence by the way that he was with them and by reasoning with them and the way that he treated them in his time there, even though it was short, maybe only a few weeks even before he was chased out. But he had some lasting influence in Thessalonica there that he had earned. It wasn't given to him by, from who he was. He got it because of how he was when he was with them.
Yeah. I think those are all really great models of influence, and I was going to mention parental influence, and I really love that you brought up the example you did of Timothy's mother and grandmother, because I think that the most important influencers are those in the home. And I think that God designed it that way.
Absolutely.
And I think that, and then when you talk to the people who study
sociologists,
those guys, yeah, when you talk to them, like especially if they're faith-based and all, they'll tell you that like what happens in the home is what influences culture, and is the bedrock of culture and all. And so when I think about that, parents, so many moms who are stuck at home with their kids all day. I mean, you hope that they realize the power that they possess to influence their children.
Yeah.
And that we know so many moms in our family, in our church family and all. Michelle, I see your comment there, that they are giant influencers. And if they really come to grips with the power they have on those children's lives, and how they can shape them, that is just an immovable force in children's lives and all. And I would especially say this too. We have some moms in our church, and maybe a couple examples of some dads, I'm not sure, but single parents, you're doing double the duty out there to influence your children and to have to figure out, how to influence well. You're doing double the duty. And so you have an even harder job to do because you're having to do so much on your own. But I just want to encourage our single parents that they are so important in their kids' lives, and just to invest in them because those kids are dependent upon them, and then understandably the larger community. But I just want to encourage our single parents, and we probably all know who are single parents. Most of them are moms, but they are doing, the ones I know of in our church are doing a great job at it. I'm proud to know them, and I'm really proud of what I see them doing in their kids' lives. And, and I think, a couple of dads too, especially, that are really, they just invest in their kids' lives so deeply. And I'm really grateful for them. And I just want to encourage them as in the job of influencing their children that they have. And some of those examples are just really, really inspiring, and, that they're doing that. So,
So my mom raised me and my brother, a single mom. And I'd say that absolutely the single greatest influencer in my life, example of hard work and dedication and sacrifice, and so many things that I learned being raised by a single mom.
And she's still doing that now with her mom and her dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Same way. We didn't bring it up earlier, but I was raised in a single parent home. My mom, my parents were divorced at an early age, so I went back and forth between homes. But if there's one thing that I learned from my mom is like hard work and dedication to achieve your specific goals. I mean, she gave up everything for me and my sister to do what, was necessary. And I've learned an innumerable amount of things from her in just her sacrifice and what she did for me and my sister Nicole. So, yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
I hear that.
Yeah. And then I think that that for me as a dad, I always feel like I've really wished, I'm at the the end of having my children in my home, and I've always wished that I had thought through more intentionally at different times and stuff like that. But to all of our dads, and believe me, we have dads with like small tribes in their family, and so our dads, they have huge influence. And again, it's just like, if we just understood how big that is and the opportunities that are in there, and so it's really that is the biggest place of influence is in the home with our parents and our moms and our dads there, and the influence and the way that they can change and shape their kids' lives.
And like you said, that's by design. They are positioned to do exactly what we're told to do in Deuteronomy 6.
Absolutely. There you go. Preach it.
Love the Lord with all your God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. These words that I command you today should be on your heart. Teach them diligently to your children. Talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise, all the time at home.
The Shema.
Yeah.
The Shema, that's right.
All the time. 1 hour a week at church is not enough.
No.
It has to happen at home.
To take that further, it's that in my home, my mom or my dad didn't really influence me spiritually, So then some of us as parents need to realize that those kids that are always hanging out at our houses, that we have an influence in their lives as well.
Yeah.
And so if the Hodnett family, and several others for that matter, but if they had shuffled me along like a stray dog, because I was always at their door, and always at Nedra's, countertop, playing with her candle, messing with it and messing with them. If they had shuffled me along as opposed to investing in me, that would be a really different situation in my life. And yet, because she set me down with a Bible and a journal, I have sat down with so many other men now, countless, and I don't mean like hundreds, but I just mean, I don't know how many it's been, countless other men and boys with a Bible and a journal, and said, this is how we do it, because she invested in my life. And she put me, and so when we talk about influence, and we talk about how influence puts us on a path, it was sitting at her kitchen counter, with that Bible and with that journal, has put me on a path that I believe has been one that I've wanted to do ever since then, since 1978. That's what I wanted to do, is to sit down with other men and put them on the same path,
Yeah.
So, in our homes, just realizing that we, our influence expands to some of those kids that are hanging around a lot, So,
We doing more biblical examples?
Sure, yeah.
You didn't take
Since
this
I
one.
stole yours.
I know. Moses and Joshua. Joshua was there for every major event with like right next to Moses, from the Mount Sinai, experience to both of them walking down the mountain, and then they just both experience how the nation of Israel is worshiping a golden calf and the breaking of the 10 Commandments, and it just goes on and on to eventually he takes up the mantle after Moses, and leads the people of Israel. He was one of the 12 spies, So I think I just love that. Moses is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Next to.
Well, and I thought about Elijah and Elisha.
Yeah.
And then I also, obviously, we have to mention the Lord and his disciples, and the influence he exerted upon them and the way that he served them.
But that one's too easy.
I know. That was easy.
That one's a given.
Stop it.
But I also want to comment that
What about Jesus?
I appreciated what Grace says in the comments. That it's like this past Sunday I talked about that God will use you right where you are. But so Grace's comments are a really good one in that right in our homes, as we're setting the table or we're making dinner, and the influence we have with those children who are running through our house, mudding up our floor and everything that belong to the people down the street and everything, the influence we have there is like it's happening as we're going through our day, and yet it's really important. And some of those kids don't have any influence in their home worth following, And so that's a great comment that Grace made there. And then finally also, the Lord speaks about in 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4 that he speaks that, that the comfort that he comforts us with is the comfort we extend to others. And so there's something there where I see that as influence as well. It's that this is what God has done for me. Let me share that with you and pass it along. And maybe I might be a little gray line there and all, but it came to my mind as a form of influence is like, this is what God has done in my life, And so that's why I really, really like our testimony series we do. And this Sunday, I'm really excited that we're going to have James Gallardi, one of our young people there, sharing his testimony. And I'm very excited about that. And that's the reason why I think that our monthly testimonies are so important, because I think it is influential, that we see our stories in someone else's life, or we see the potential that is in someone else's life that could be for us as well, and all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right, we're at that time again where we should be.
Going by fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for tuning in tonight. And next week, I imagine that. Next week will we have a special guest with us next week?
We'll do something different, but we'll do something.
Yes, that's right. Next week,
we should
because somebody has an anniversary next week.
Next
week, skipping out.
That's right.
Yep.
So Jared is going to go put his romance on.
Oh my!
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
And he's going to go celebrate his. India Adler beat me to it. Bye, India. We'll see you down in India, Garland, Texas. We'll see you next week. So Jared's going to go get romantic and everything for his anniversary and won't be with us. I don't know. I mean, we can be romantic. I mean,
why are you looking at me?
We can be romantic. I mean,
it's just turned really.
What has happened?
It's turned.
Yeah. So
I won't be here.
He can't be romantic.
I'm going to celebrate
a little too much into what I said.
My
earlier.
anniversary with Grace.
Oh, fine. Go ahead. So we might have a special guest next week.
Yeah, we'll do something. He doesn't know it yet, but I have someone in mind. I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
If he can be here to be our stand-in Jared and run our tech and maybe even sit on the mic over there.
Yeah, that's good. That'd be really great.
If he's watching, I got to text him right when this is over.
Yeah, but you know who you are already, probably. So anyway,
we just name it.
I haven't seen his name though. I don't think he's
good old Dan Andros. We love that guy. Shh. We love that guy here.
I haven't talked to him yet.
Oh.
So listen, a couple of things to remind you about is, hey, you know what? If some of you, if you want to make it really easy to find our live streams, is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And that way, when we pop on with something brilliant to say, you'll get this little ding and it'll go, hey, Crossing Community Church is alive. And then you can tune in.
Praise
right?
God. We are live.
And so subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you get the notifications. Make sure that you check your emails and your Facebook often, and be praying for us as a church as we try and figure out what it means to reopen sometime in the near future, hopefully in the next month to 6 weeks or something like that. But we're thinking about that now, and we're praying about that. That maybe that will happen one day in the near future. And then this weekend, ministry this weekend, the Revelation Sunday School class. You pick up that Zoom link in your in the Friday email, and then also
we'll make sure the link works this week too.
Oh, did we have a problem last week?
By the way, yeah, last week we changed
Darn.
some settings, and I think that messed up the password.
All right, and then also this Sunday is James Gallardi is going to be sharing his testimony. We're very excited about that. And then all you parents, we'd love to be having you come out and enjoy Sun Country Zoom Sunday School class. That starts at 11 o'clock on Sunday, right after the service. So. I think that's, and then I want to thank everyone also because Betty and I have had a lot of people reach out to us and say you're praying for our friend Lillian. my kind of adopted mom there or whatever up here in Pennsylvania. And I just went by way of update. We received word today that her temperatures dropped, and she's doing better. She's still got a long road of her, but she is doing better. So I just want to thank you for praying for her. I'll try and get an update to the church through Facebook on that. But thank you very much for your kindness in regards to that. We appreciate it. So, all right, I think that's all, isn't it? You have anything you want to say?
Nope.
Okay, do you have anything you want to say?
Nope.
Nope, I don't either. I think we're done.
All right.
Great.
So
We're
it's
done
been
here.
nice. It's been so nice to spend this time together, just to laugh and share a smile. There you go. Carol Burnett. Carol Burnett.
Who's that?
Carol Burnett. She was
I'm
before
just
you.
kidding. I
She
know.
was a redhead like you, though. All right. Good night, folks. Bye-bye.